My name is Sheila Corona. Welcome to Sassy Seer Sheila and New Light Streaming Love, as this will be seen on both channels. This is okay. This really is the final confession from a real alien by Jason Gray. Written June 22nd, 2026. Sorry, I gotta check my. And it begins. The great secret was never hidden. We have been trying to tell you for generations. There comes a point when a secret becomes so obvious that continuing to hide it becomes completely unnecessary. Not because it has been protected, not because it has been buried, but because nobody can see or believe what is sitting directly in front of them. That is the strangest thing about humanity. You assume secrets are hidden in vaults, locked inside military bases, buried beneath mountains, stored in classified archives, protected by governments, guarded by powerful institutions. Sometimes they are, but the greatest secrets operate differently. And I know he's right about that and it's true. Everything he wrote there, that's absolutely so that there are secrets done like that. But sometimes they are, but the greatest secrets operate differently. The greatest secrets are always hidden in plain sight. They are repeated so often that people stop hearing them. They are displayed so openly that people stop seeing them. They are told so many times that they become invisible. And that brings us to aliens, other worlds, other dimensions, other intelligences, other realities. Did I mention aliens? The subjects humanity has spent centuries pretending are completely impossible while simultaneously becoming completely obsessed with them. Think about that for a moment. If extraterrestrials are complete nonsense, why can't humanity stop talking about them? Why does every single generation return to the exact same subjects? Aliens. Why do the exact same themes appear again and again and again? Aliens. Why does the species seem incapable of letting the idea die? Aliens. Why? Because somewhere deep inside the collective human psyche, something already knows the truth, including the memory. Long before modern science fiction existed, ancient cultures filled their stories with visitors from the sky, messengers, watchers, teachers, travelers, star people, sky beings, entities descending from realms beyond ordinary reality. The language changed, the symbols changed, the stories changed. The underlying pattern remained exactly the same. Then came the literature. Humanity began writing the same story using different words. Journeys beyond Earth, worlds beyond worlds, civilizations among the stars, portals, dimensions, strange visitors, hidden realms, infinite possibilities. The themes multiplied. not because authors were collaborating, not because there was a conspiracy, but because their consciousness kept arriving at the exact same destination again and again and again. Then came the 20th century, and suddenly the floodgates exploded. The stories became impossible to ignore. The public consumed them by the billions, not millions, billions. Think about what that means. Entire civilizations sat in darkened theaters, staring at giant screens while stories about extraterrestrials unfolded before their eyes. Entire generations grew up immersed in the possibility that humanity was not alone. And yet, somehow, people still ask, why isn't anyone telling us? Telling you what? They never stopped. Look at the evidence. Look at the stories. Look at the cultural obsession. For nearly a century, humanity has been screaming the same thing at itself over and over and over. A farm boy looks up at twin suns and hears the words, "Use the force, Luke." An entire generation absorbs the idea that reality contains an invisible field connecting all living things, not merely technology, consciousness, connection, an unseen intelligence permeating existence itself. Millions cheer, nobody notices. Then a little boy named Elliot meets a stranded visitor from another world. A glowing finger touches his own. Suddenly, an entire civilization is crying over the possibility that beings from the stars might not arrive as conquerors, but as friends. The film becomes legendary. Nobody notices. Then humanity sits spellbound, watching ordinary people drawn toward a mountain by an inexplicable signal, a melody, a vision, a calling they cannot ignore. The ships arrive, communication begins. The audience is mesmerized. Nobody notices. Then comes the warning. A monstrous organism from deep space arrives aboard a vessel. The universe is no longer friendly. The stars contain dangers as well as wonders. Humanity learns that contact may not always be comfortable. The movie becomes iconic. Nobody notices. Then comes a towel, a bewildered traveler, a galaxy filled with absurdity, and a simple reminder: don't panic. Humanity laughs. The message slips quietly into collective memory. Nobody notices. Then come the countless others: visitors, stargates, parallel universes, wormholes, time travel, hidden dimensions, artificial intelligence, ancient civilizations, cosmic networks, interstellar explorers, reality-bending intelligences, the same themes, repeated endlessly, different names, different costumes, different worlds, the same signal, the same message, the same whisper: you are not alone. You never were. People often ask why alien stories became so successful. The answer is remarkably simple. Humans were not watching fiction. Humans were rehearsing Children rehearse adulthood through play. Pilots rehearse emergencies through simulation. Civilization rehearse future realities through story. Science fiction is not merely entertainment. It is cultural preparation. I've always also kind of wondered if it wasn't memory being written. You know, they think they are writing entertainment, but I also often have wondered if it wasn't memory. But back to Jason here, it is cultural preparation, a psychological training ground, a place where impossible ideas become survivable, a sandbox where tomorrow can be explored before it arrives. The truly fascinating part is how transparent the process became. The books became more explicit. The movies became more explicit. The television shows became more explicit. The discussions became more explicit. The theories became more explicit. The public became more interested. The stigma weakened. The conversation expanded, and still, people kept asking, when will disclosure happen? Disclosure was never a single event. Disclosure was always a process. Humanity has been slowly acclimating itself to a larger reality for generations. Every book was a breadcrumb. Every film was a rehearsal. Every story was preparation. One day I realized something so ridiculous that I laughed out loud. The greatest secret was never extraterrestrials. The greatest secret was that humanity has been openly discussing extraterrestrials for so long that it stopped recognizing what it was doing. The species has been confessing to itself for generations, not through governments, not through institutions, not through official announcements, through stories. Stories have always been safer than facts. A truth wrapped in fiction can travel where a naked truth cannot. A civilization can contemplate an impossible idea through art long before it can confront it directly. The stories were not hiding the secret. The stories were always carrying it. Then I made a discovery that explained everything. The reason these stories resonate so deeply is because they are not really about aliens. Not entirely. They are about us. Every alien story eventually becomes a human story. Every first contact story eventually becomes a mirror. Every visitor forces humanity to confront itself, its fears, its hopes, its divisions, its potential, its future. The search for extraterrestrials has always been, in part, a search for humanity, and perhaps that is why the stories never stop, because they are not simply asking whether we are alone. They are asking what we are and And then yesterday, I finally decided to let the cat out of the bag. Not because I discovered the secret, but because I realized the secret had been standing directly in front of everyone for decades. The greatest secret was never hidden. The greatest secret was never locked away. The greatest secret was never buried beneath a mountain. The greatest secret was projected onto the movie screens, printed in books, broadcast through televisions, whispered through stories, passed from generation to generation, repeated so often that nobody could see it anymore. And after all these years, after all the books, after all the films, after all the theories, after all the arguments, after all the speculation, I suppose there is only one thing left for me to do. Full disclosure. I am an alien. The fact that most of you interpreted yesterday's announcement as a joke merely proves how effective the cover story has been. In hindsight, I should have expected this. Humanity ignored giant spaceships hovering over cities in films, ignored visitors arriving from the stars, ignored messages from distant worlds, ignored ancient cosmic mysteries, ignored the Force, ignored the towels, ignored the warnings, ignored the invitations, ignored the clues for decades. Perhaps I should not be surprised that when an actual alien finally tells you the truth, you laugh. Honestly, I would probably laugh too, and that more than anything else is why I have grown strangely fond of the species. The humans are infinitely more intelligent than they believe, infinitely more curious than they admit, infinitely more connected than they realize, and infinitely more hilarious than anyone in the galaxy was prepared for. End transmission. Addendum to the transmission. There is one final matter I feel obligated to address. Now that I have publicly disclosed my extraterrestrial origins, there is a very real possibility that I am in some exceptionally serious trouble back home. In hindsight, there were probably protocols regarding this sort of thing, forms, approvals, committees, interstellar oversight boards, bureaucrats. Every advanced civilization eventually develops bureaucrats. This appears to be a universal law. Somewhere at this very moment, there is a deeply concerned galactic compliance officer reviewing my file while muttering things like, "Who authorized Subject Gray to reveal the simulation? Who approved the disclosure of his alien status? Why is he discussing the Force, interdimensional visitors, and postal correspondence in the same transmission? How did this individual pass psychological screening?" These are all fair questions. Questions I myself have occasionally asked. Unfortunately, the disclosure has already occurred. The cat is no longer merely out of the bag. The cat has commandeered the spacecraft and is currently broadcasting from orbit. There is no putting it back, which means this could potentially be my final transmission. Not because anything dramatic is about to happen, but because there is always the possibility that someone from headquarters finally notices what I have been doing. One moment, I'm sitting here drinking Red Bull and orange Gatorade and writing stories. The next moment, I'm being escorted through a dimensional checkpoint by two very polite but extremely disappointed extraterrestrial administrators. Jason, we are going to need you to come with us. Is this about the disclosure? It is most definitely about the disclosure. It is mostly about the disclosure. I regret nothing. We know. Hopefully, it does not come to that, because the truth is, I still have a great deal left to disclose. Entire folders, entire archives, entire transmissions, entire ridiculous observations about humanity that have yet to be documented. The report is far from complete. In fact, I have barely started. And if I am being completely honest, there is something else I'm looking forward to before the authorities arrive and pull me out of the simulation. I have not even checked my P.O. box yet, which, from an alien anthropological perspective, may be one of the most fascinating developments of all, because in an age where nearly everything has become digital, some of you still remember. You still remember how human beings communicated before algorithms, before notifications, before endless scrolling, before every thought became a disposable piece of data floating through electronic space. You remember letters, actual letters, physical objects, messages that can be held in your hands, artifacts that leave evidence that a person existed. Think about that process. You sit down, you pick up a pen, you place thoughts onto paper, not pixels. Paper. You fold that paper, place it into an envelope, address the envelope, double check the address because nobody trusts their own handwriting, add a return address just in case the universe decides to become complicated, acquire a stamp, attach the stamp, travel to a post office or mailbox, release the letter into a system that somehow continues functioning despite all available evidence suggesting it should be impossible. Then comes the most extraordinary part. You wait. You simply trust that the message will find its destination, and most of the time it does. A thought born in one mind, written by one hand, travels across cities, across provinces, across countries, sometimes across oceans, eventually arriving in the hands of another human being. No algorithm, no engagement metrics, no advertising profile, no recommendation engine, just one person reaching another person. It is one of the most beautiful technologies humanity has ever created. A physical transmission system, a network made not of silicon, but of trust. Which is why I find myself strangely excited to check that little box, because unlike digital communication, every letter leaves evidence, proof that someone was there, proof that someone cared enough to write, proof that a moment existed, proof that a signal was received, and perhaps that is what has always fascinated me most about your species. Not your technology, not your governments, not your institutions, not your endless arguments on the internet. Your ability to reach across distance and say, I was here. These were my thoughts. I wanted someone else to know. That is a remarkable thing. If this does turn out to be my final transmission before Galactic Administration revokes my simulation privileges and drags me back to whatever star system I originated from, let the record show that my final observation remains unchanged. Humanity is far stranger than advertised, far funnier than expected, far more resilient than it realizes, and far more beautiful than it believes. Hopefully, this is not goodbye. Hopefully, headquarters is distracted. Hopefully, the paperwork gets lost. Hopefully, the compliance department is as inefficient as every other bureaucracy in the known universe, because I still have a lot more to say. And somewhere out there, if the postal system continues performing its ancient magic, there may already be a letter making its way through space and time toward a little box with my name on it. If so, I look forward to reading it. In transmission for now, Jason Gray. Now, in the Show More section of this video is a link where you can go and find that P.O. box if you wish to send Jason a letter. I'm hoping that we do get to have our next conversation very soon. And as I was recording this, actually, I heard from Jason, and he said, 1 year ago today, we did our first conscious conversation. Perhaps we'll do it today. I don't know. We'll see. Until we meet again, be well, my friends.